Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jake, the Scary Story Guy. I apologize if I'm a little lower energy than usual. I'm in a food coma right now. I made some chicken Alfredo for dinner, and you gotta admit, I nailed it. And perhaps you noticed this is my first video in a while. I took a bit of a horror hiatus here at the beginning of the year, but I'm back now to care for you. At least those of you who are subscribed to me. If you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, I'm sorry, there's simply not room in my heart for you. But guys, I confess, I'm not like those other horror content creators out there, those better horror content creators who keep a consistent schedule throughout the year. It's just not me. I'll hit you with 10 videos in October and 1 in February. And that's not because I have any less of a taste for the genre during the month of love. It's because the best horror movie that came out this month was something called Lisa Frankenstein, which, you know, sorry, no thanks. But the good news is I have been reading more horror lately, so I'm excited to drop a few book reviews in the meantime until the horror movies get good. Now, if you ask anywhere on the internet for horror novel recommendations, it's gonna take you 10-15 minutes to wade through all the Stephen King before other stuff comes up. And I love Stephen King. Look at all these Stephen King books I've got here. I've reviewed several of his novels on this channel, but I'm not a fan of monopolies, guys. I love me some competition. And a book that did keep coming up in Reddit threads about, you know, what horror novel should I read is this one. It's called The Elementals. It's a 1981 gothic horror novel by a guy named Michael McDowell. Now, McDowell found his biggest professional success writing the screenplays for Beetlejuice and The Nightmare Before Christmas, but he did write some novels, and they were good enough to prompt Stephen King to declare him the finest writer of paperback originals in America. Right there, on the top of the book. Now, this is a novel I'm guessing most of you have not read or maybe even heard of, so I'm here to tell you whether Reddit's advice is worth taking or not. So The Elementals is about a pair of old and wealthy Alabama families. They're tied together by marriage, and they own these 3 vacation homes along the Gulf Coast. When the matriarch of one of these families dies, they all take a vacation to these homes together, and strange things are afoot. So basically, the middle of these 3 houses has just been this constant, lifelong source of terror for these families. They have no idea what's going on in there. There's this weird sand dune that's like piling up only on that house. So as a reader, you're like, okay, we got some mystery going on here. There's also a bit of a mystery about why these families keep going back to this place they're so scared of, but that's neither here nor there. And there are a lot of characters of roughly equal importance in this novel. I'd say the main protagonist is a 13-year-old girl named India McCrae. She was raised in New York. She's not from Alabama, so this is just her extended family that she goes to visit every once in a while. She's the outsider here, so she kind of serves as our avatar. It's her first time meeting a lot of these people. It's her first time at these vacation homes, so we're learning along with her as she experiences all this stuff for the first time. And I did find myself quite liking, not just India, all these characters, really. McDowell really succeeds at creating a family that feels like a real family. Even the ones that are irritating, they're irritating in a way that's kind of like compelling to read. You're rooting for these guys. Their dialogue is very dryly funny. There's one character who just acts completely insane all the time, and it's very entertaining to read everyone else's reactions to her. Sort of reminds you of The Office, how when Michael and Dwight are acting up, Jim's just constantly looking at the camera like, and I just like that dynamic of regular responses to people behaving oddly. It's nearly always very funny if done right. And McDowell also succeeded as something that's very, very important in a horror novel, arguably the most important thing in a gothic horror novel like this, which is crafting a creepy atmosphere. There's so much of haunted house stories is just wrapped up in the house itself, right? So is the author able to create this atmosphere in the house, this backstory of the house that is not just memorable, but also kind of unique? And I just thought this was a really cool idea. These vacation homes, this sometimes island, sometimes not island that they're situated on. It just felt like a very real place that these families would go visit. And it just felt like it had real separation from the world. There's this really interesting dreamlike quality to all of it. They're all just like, the days are blending together. It's hot as f outside, so they're all just kind of like walking around in this heat stroke stupor half the time. And it does a good job making you as the reader wonder, okay, what's real, what's not real? If shit hits the fan, are these people going to be in any kind of state to do anything about it? So that's the good. Unfortunately, I did end up feeling like a lot of the story direction and scares here ended up being pretty weak. Tale as old as time, right? It is so much easier to execute a scary build-up than to execute a scary payoff, right? Just ask Stephen King. I didn't like the ultimate explanations for what was going on. It honestly ended up feeling like McDowell was just writing the stream of consciousness, just whatever came into his head, and then explaining it all with, I don't know what's going on. That's just how it is. And there is one character who sort of becomes more important as the story goes along, a family servant named Odessa, that I thought was pretty weak. And she kind of embodies what is just really a trope of Southern horror, which is that she plays the black person who is in touch with spirits and in touch with voodoo and stuff like that. And so throughout the second half of the novel, she's just constantly explaining all this stuff stuff, the ins and outs of ghosts and spirits and all that. And she's obviously just there to be the exposition. Like, she's the only one who feels more like a plot device than an actual person, and it does get pretty stale. Because basically by the end, I felt like we'd reached a point where like anything could happen, but not in a good way. Obviously, you don't want to over-explain things in a horror story. You don't want to, show the monster too much, so to speak, and McDowell definitely isn't erring on that side of things here. But there's also a certain amount of cohesion that I think it's fair to expect, and so I found myself getting disappointed as, shit's getting real near the end, because I just found myself not caring, because I knew I wasn't going to understand any of it. So I guess I'll say that the Elemental succeeds at getting you to hope it's scary, right? There's a good setup, there's fun characters, there's this memorable setting, but it doesn't succeed at actually being scary. I don't think my eyebrows even so much as raised while I was reading this. I actually think this might have made a more interesting scary movie than a scary novel. I think this would have been a really interesting setting to see portrayed on screen. I think it might have been effective. So much of what scares us is audio, is visual, and it's hard to write a scary novel, but it has been done, it can be done. But sadly, it wasn't done here, so I am gonna give the Elementals 2.5 stars out of 5. All right, guys, stay tuned for more spooky content coming soon. We've got some horror movies coming out in theaters this month, and I will say the horror novel I'm reading right now is succeeding a lot more at unsettling me, so stay tuned for a review of that. But in the meantime, thank you for watching this video, and here's hoping you survive to see the next one.